Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 263 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Lieberman, and today we're here to talk about overcoming 3 common mistakes with your consulting lead gen process. This is about troubleshooting. And the reason why I wanted to have this episode here today, we've talked about different challenges along the way in the course of all of these episodes. But the real reason that I wanted to dive into this particular topic today is I don't think that we spend enough time collectively talking about the exception path. We so often talk about the positive path. Here's how to generate leads. Here's the best way to generate leads. Here's how to generate quality leads. Here's how to create inbound leads. All of these positive path scenarios and frameworks and tips and tricks. But I think as a whole, myself included, we don't talk enough about where things go wrong and that things do go wrong. And it's actually very normal that things are going wrong and what to do about it. And so that's what I want to focus today's episode on is, first of all, just normalizing the fact that if you've got a well-oiled machine as it relates to lead generation, first of all, you're the exception, not the norm. Most independent consultants don't have a well-oiled machine as it relates to business development. And then even if you do have that well-oiled machine, it breaks. This is not something you can just put in place and it works forever. Times change, things change, AI comes into play, all of these things happen. And so it's a constant process of experimentation and testing and being really clear and honest with yourself about what's working and what's not working, so you can make some hypotheses and make adjustments to continue setting yourself up to reach and even exceed your business goals. So that's what we're here for today. I want to make sure that we talk about all the realities of running a business. And the reality is that no one is doing lead gen perfectly. No one's doing lead gen without making mistakes. No one's selling without making mistakes. So let's just be honest about that and put in a process for you to not only be aware of what are the most common mistakes you can watch for them, but also through this episode, thinking about not only what are these mistakes and how do they apply to your business, but also how do you go through this process I'm about to share with you in a way that helps you to uncover what your particular mistakes are that you might be making or having areas of opportunity within your own lead gen process to improve the leads that you're creating, increase the quantity, improve the quality, and ultimately set yourself up to have a predictable lead generation process. So that's what we're here for. On a quick personal note, I am about to leave here this afternoon to go to Boise, Idaho. I'll be there for 5 days at a swim meet, a 5-day swim meet. It's actually a 4-day swim meet. But it's a sectionals swim meet. My oldest son, who's 15, has been working for basically a year to qualify for this swim meet, which is quite a difficult feat. But he did it. I'm so proud of him. And I can't wait to go watch him swim and to see how he competes against swimmers across the Western region of the US. He's been working so hard on achieving his goals. Okay, so that's what I'm up to personally. Now let's talk about this. Back to the episode. The agenda for today, I'll share with you the companion resource that goes with this episode. We'll talk about those 3 common mistakes. Again, not only the mistakes, but also the framework of diagnosing these mistakes so that you can apply this to you and your business and understanding where the gaps are with your lead generation process. You can prioritize fixing those, and then we'll wrap it up with putting this episode into action. So let's first talk about the companion resource. It's the Consultant's Lead Gen Sprint. You might be aware of this, or it might be a surprise, but the spring sprint starts on April 14th. It closes on April 13th. So you need to register by April 13th. If you go online and register now, you'll have access to all of the materials between now and when we start on the 14th. So that can be a great way to just leisurely get yourself prepared and set yourself up for success. So go do that now. It is at consultantsprint.com. Don't wait. The next one isn't until the fall. So we want to make sure that you've got your pipeline accelerated now. Okay. And if you're listening to this in the future, you can still go to consultantsprint.com and likely either it's open or there will be a wait list. So go check that out. All right, my friend. Now let's talk about these 3 most common challenges with your pipeline and what to do about them. And also this framework of figuring out what do you need to troubleshoot here in your lead gen process. So the first challenge that I find for independent consultants is that they're not having enough conversations. They're not having enough conversations with ideal clients. They're not having enough conversations with decision makers at ideal clients. And the root causes of this are, I'll put them into 2 buckets for you. The first is what I'll call a volume gap. We don't have enough people to talk to. And then the second is the access gap. We're not getting people to agree to talk with us. So when we look at the root causes of, let's break those out into 2 buckets here, right? We're not having enough conversations. Why not? First, let's talk about the volume gap. I find that there's 3 most common reasons why this volume gap occurs, and I'm going to walk you through these. The first is what I'll call the prediction trap. This is you over-filtering leads by trying to foresee whether they have a need or a budget before reaching out to them. Here's what I find. For independent consultants, especially if your pipeline isn't where you want it to be, we oftentimes discount talking to a person that we worked with 3 or 4 years ago. We discount talking with someone in our warm network. We think that they're maybe too junior in their roles. They aren't a decision maker. We think that they're not in our industry anymore. We think that they won't be able to help us in some reason. So we're triaging all of these things. But I call this the prediction trap because so often when you're trying to over-engineer the type of people or the people that you're talking with and making all of these assumptions about whether or not they will be a good conversation, you end up leaving so much opportunity on the table. I could tell you 1,000 stories of times where consultants got on a call, a Zoom call for 30 minutes to reconnect with a former colleague that they thought would, quite frankly, never lead anywhere. And it led to a deal, a couple of weeks time frame, because there was a deal with, some consulting opportunity within that organization, or they introduced them to someone and it went so quickly because of that trust transfer. So when you're having a volume gap, you don't have enough people to approach, look at what you're doing. And are you discounting people in your warm market that you haven't talked to, in your warm network, I should say, that you haven't talked to because you're making all of these assumptions? If you don't have enough people to talk to hit your numbers of how many people you need to be talking to in a given week, the best place to start is in your warm network. And if you've discounted those people, you're likely leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. Another challenge with the root cause of you not having enough people to approach is what I'll call the identity misalignment. The reason why you don't have enough people to approach is because if you're having this identity misalignment, you're seeing yourself as someone who's asking for a favor rather than a peer who deserves a seat at the table, who that person that you're reaching out to would find value in talking with. It doesn't matter how you're generating leads, right? It could be through speaking, it could be through networking, it could be through attending events. Let's say you're at an event and you don't see yourself as a peer. You talk with someone who maybe they work at your ideal client. Maybe they're even a decision maker at that ideal client. And you have this identity misalignment. And you think that by recommending that you follow up from that event with a call to talk more about a conversation that you've had with them to add value, and you think of it more as asking for a favor, they're doing you a favor by having a meeting, you end up not getting that call. Or, end up most likely not even asking for that call or recommending that you have that call because you see yourself in a different way. You don't see yourself as a peer, as an expert, as someone who would be valuable to talk to. Instead, you are thinking things like, oh, this is a favor. No wonder you don't have enough people on your calendar to talk with who are decision makers or connectors to decision makers. And the last one I'll give you from a root cause perspective, from a volume, if you don't have enough people to talk to in your lead gen process, is what I'll call self censorship. This is where you're talking yourself out of reaching out or some way of getting that person on your calendar because you're either worried about them saying no, you don't want to be ghosted. At the end of the day, you don't want to be rejected. Although so many people tell me, oh, I don't have a fear of rejection, but then they self censor. So why are you doing that? Internal doubt of some sort. Or sometimes I notice the problem, which is like, I want to save the person for when I feel more clear or I feel more capable. I'm going to save that person for later versus looking at this and saying, you know what? I will never be perfect at lead generation, but a conversation right now would be so valuable for both of us. So those are the three common reasons why you might not have enough people to approach when you're thinking about your lead gen system, whatever it is, right? It could be anything, attending events, speaking, networking, even cold outreach. The second component of not having enough conversations is what I'll call the access gap. You might have plenty of people to approach. You might not be self-censoring, or you might not be falling into the prediction trap. So you're reaching out to a lot of people in some or connecting with them in some way, but they're not coming onto your calendar. They're ignoring you. They're not scheduling a call after you do a speaking engagement. They're not responding to your text when they're even a warm person that you know. And so why is that? Here are the three most common root causes that I see for this access gap. And that is number one, what I'll call a high cognitive load. You're putting too much on them. It's like, I would love to meet. Let me know if that sounds good. Here's a link to my calendar even. The ask is open-ended. They don't know why you want to meet. You may even be putting too much logistically on their plate. Even though you've got a calendar link, now they've got to match that up to their own calendar. It requires so much effort. Then their answer is just ignoring you or a no, usually just ignoring you, right? So you want to address that. If you think you're being flexible, if you think you're being easy to work with, you might relook at that and say, you know what? I think I'm putting too much on their plate to make this an easy yes for them. How do I make it easier for them to say, yes, I would love to meet with you? What you're wanting to meet about sounds so valuable. And the way that we're setting this up is really easy. Which then leads me to another reason why people might not be agreeing to meet with you, whether they're ideal clients or connectors to ideal clients, is what I'll call the value deficiency. You've got a deficiency in your value. Here's what happens so often. Consultants reach out and say, here's what I do. It's some form of, this is what I do. If you need that, let's talk. That's not valuable. That's a sales pitch. So you want to lead with something valuable to them. I call that a conversation starter. That's one of the first things we work on in the lead gen sprint, right? How do you start a valuable conversation with your ideal client? Whether it's a warm network person that you're reaching out to, whether it's someone at an event that you're meeting and you want to get a call after that meeting, whether it's you speaking, what would cause them to get on your calendar? Those are some examples of what creates the access gap. The last one I'll give you, which is when people are not agreeing to meet with you, one of the reasons why might be what I'll call expert subservience. This is where you're approaching with like this, I don't want to bother them type of a mindset. And it creates like, I hope they'll meet with me, but I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to pester. I don't want to feel too pushy. And so you end up with tentative language, excessive politeness, and that signals to them that your time is less valuable than theirs. So you want to be thinking about the way you're positioning, how you're asking for a meeting, how you're recommending that you have a meeting with this person in a way that's valuable to them, in a way that makes it easy for them to say yes, and in a way that comes across as valuable to both of you. So when we think about this first bucket, if you're in the situation where you're not having enough conversations, first of all, you want to know, is that your particular problem? When you look at your overall lead generation system and you ask yourself, what does it need to look like? What is ideal? Maybe it's that your calculator tells you, I need to have roughly 5 conversations a week with potential clients or connectors to potential clients to roll up to my revenue goal. You want to be calculating that. When you know that number, then it makes it so easy for you to diagnose along the way. Where is the biggest problem? Is it that you're not hitting those numbers? You don't have enough people to talk to. That's what we just identified, right? And then why is it that reason? Why are you not hitting that number every week? 5 calls. A lot of times it's because you can't find 5 people to meet with. And so you want to drill into the reason why, like I just shared with you. Is it the prediction trap? Is it the identity misalignment? Is it the self-censorship? Is it the high cognitive load, the value deficiency, the expert subservience? These are the most common reasons why this might be happening. But ask yourself, why is this happening for me in my business? That way you can start addressing the actual root cause. It's not just, oh no, I don't have enough time, or oh no, I don't know how to get these people on my calendar, or oh no, they don't want to talk to me, or this feels too salesy. Like those are so surface level. We want to get down to the actual root cause so you can address it and then build what I call a micro skill. Like address that issue of self-censorship, for example, as a micro skill and a mindset that goes with it so you can overcome that. And then once you have overcome that, then it might be dialed in and you can move to the next stage. Maybe you've got enough people on your calendar, then what? But you want to be addressing these micro challenges. And this is why it's so important to feel like, well, I'm not doing it right. Everyone else is doing it right. I don't know how to do it right. This is not true. Everyone is having challenges at some point in their process, and recognizing that this is normal and then figuring out what to do about it is the key here. Working on not having problems is not the right goal. The right goal is figuring out exactly how to diagnose your problems, the challenges with your lead gen process, and then therefore you can address the root cause in such a granular way. And this is the type of work that we do in the lead gen sprint, is not only setting up a framework to generate the leads, but also having a framework to diagnose where things aren't going right in a very granular way so that you can address it and then be able to move on to that challenge into the next one, and then address that next one, and then the next one and the next one, until you've got yourself to the place where hitting your revenue goal is inevitable. And then you can set a new revenue goal. All right. So that's the first mistake that you want to look at. Are you generating enough conversations in a given week or month or quarter to support your revenue goals? Knowing what that number is, calculating it, and then putting it into action so that you can test against that number. And if you're not hitting the number, which is so common, especially to start, then having a way to diagnose why that is. So then let's move to the next one, which is you're hitting those numbers on a weekly basis or most weeks. The next most common challenge is that you're not uncovering opportunities. So let's say that your calculator tells you that you need to have 5 calls a week with potential clients or connectors to potential clients, and you're doing that. You've addressed that first stage. Then let's say now you're at the place where you're having that activity, but you're not uncovering opportunities. So you're not seeing deals in your pipeline the way that you would expect, knowing that you're having these conversations. So what would the root cause of that be? Here's what I find. There's 6 main root causes here. The first is what I'll call the advice trap. You're talking too much. You're giving advice. You're proving how smart you are. Now, listen, you're not going there on purpose to try to prove how smart you are, but sometimes it's easy to fall into that trap because we think that our job is to show them what we know so that they would trust us. But that's not actually your job. Your job is to ask really powerful questions, to get them to talk, to get them to describe to you what their challenge is, to get them to explain why it matters, to get them to explain what happens if it doesn't get solved, to ask questions in a way that helps them to see their blind spots. That's where you might be falling down when it comes to having really good conversations, but them not going anywhere, them going into the friend zone, for example. You might be having a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is where you go onto a call and you think to yourself, I don't expect this to go anywhere. I hear this all the time. I'm hitting my number, my 5 for the week, for example, And these three people I don't expect to go anywhere, but I'm getting the reps in. That is not useful. When we go onto a call thinking it's not going to go anywhere, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We don't want that for you. So notice if you're thinking that, even some of the time, and get yourself into the headspace of curiosity of, I wonder where this could go. The third one is what I'll call premature solutioning. So, one of the reasons why you might be having a friend zone where you're having conversations, but they're not going anywhere in terms of onto your pipeline, it could be because of premature solutioning. And this is where maybe you're pitching your services or you're telling them what you do before you even know what the problem is, or before the prospect even knows that we're here to talk about like discovery. You might be just on a networking call and you're now all of a sudden pitching to them what you do, hoping that something you say will resonate and they'll say, oh, I need that. Or maybe you are on a discovery call and you're leaping ahead to, this is how we would help you and this is how much it costs, almost getting to the point of expecting them to figure out if it's a good fit or not, versus you truly understanding what it is the challenge is, why they're having that challenge, how you can help them solve it, and walking them through a process where they're experiencing that as you go. So those are several of the examples of how you get yourself into a situation where you're having these conversations and they're not going anywhere. The next one I'll give you, so those are the first three, there's three more, and then we'll move on to the third mistake. But the next one that you might be experiencing if your conversations are not going anywhere onto your pipeline, for example, is when you're allowing the conversation to stay in the safe zone, right? You don't want to be salesy. You don't want to be pushy. And so you end up just with more of a pleasant networking chat rather than getting into the depths of it, right? Asking disruptive questions, asking something that might seem uncomfortable for them, asking questions that help them to see blind spots or makes them feel a little uncomfortable, but in a valuable way. So you might be in a place where you're having a lot of pleasant conversations and describing what you do. And then someone says to you, we'll keep you in mind. You do not want that. When someone says, I'll keep you in mind, you have room for opportunity within those conversations. The next reason why you might be getting stuck with conversations not going anywhere is when you are having what I'll call subservient conversations. This is where you're seeking approval or waiting for the person you're talking to lead the process, where you're waiting for them to ask you what you do. You're waiting for them to say, oh, it might be that we need that in this organization, rather than you coming at that as a leader. You're the one who has initiated this call, most likely in some form or fashion. You're the leader of this. Thinking of yourself as a peer and how do I lead this conversation in a way that helps to provide value for this person and leads to a next step, one way or the other. And then finally, we'll call it the bridge void. The last reason why you might be getting stuck with conversations that aren't going anywhere is where you're failing to offer a compelling, low friction bridge to the next step, which is ideally discovery, or you getting introduced to someone in their network that they think might be a good person for you to know. When you lack a clear, value-driven process for that next step and have that in your mind and commit to it and find a way to incorporate it into the conversation you're having in a congruent way, this could very well be the opportunity for you. When you're leaving a conversation with, let's touch base or I'll keep you in mind, this is a vacuum. And so you want to get yourself to the place of figuring out how to avoid that most of the time because you're addressing the issue. The issue is that you don't have a clear next step, or you're not brave enough to say the clear next step, or you're talking yourself out of the clear next step. And so therefore, you're not leading that conversation. And you're not bridging into the discovery call, for example. So similar to the subservient conversation, but in a way where you're not figuring out what that bridge is to a discovery and then asking for it in a valuable, recommending it, I should say, in a valuable way where that person you're talking with says, yes, let's have another call. So those are 6 of the top reasons why your conversations might not be going anywhere. Again, you want to take a step back and say, okay, is this my problem? Is it that you know how many conversations you need to be having to support your revenue goals? And then you know that you're getting those conversations most of the time. Now, the fix here is understanding why aren't more of those conversations creating an opportunity or uncovering an opportunity so that the pipeline is filled and so that you can then move on to the next step of the process. You want to be knowing where is your problem, where is the challenge, where's the bottleneck, and then addressing that. And also knowing that bottlenecks are normal. So there's nothing wrong with you or you're not bad at business development. It's that you want to put a process in place, a mindset in place, and the visibility for yourself in place so you know exactly where this bottleneck is occurring so you can address it. And like I said, I've got diagnostics that I've created that I go through with the sprinters in their sprint process so that they can figure this out step by step. We're not just going through the positive path. And you don't want to be going through the positive path either as you're implementing your own pipeline process in your business. Okay, let's wrap up this episode with the third most common mistake is thinking that you don't have enough time. You might be busy with personal things. You might be busy with client delivery for whatever reason. The most common things I find are when we think that we're not succeeding at business development in the way we want to, it comes down to either I don't have enough time right now for business development, or you're not being effective with the limited hours that you do have. Those are the two kind of categories, if you will, when it comes to you thinking you don't have enough time. And that's the reason why your pipeline doesn't look the way you want it to. So when you think that you don't have enough time as a prioritization gap, here's some root causes for you to look at to see, as this might be my reason. The first is what I'll call the client first martyrdom. This is you prioritizing client delivery to the exclusion of your own business growth. And you think you have to do that. You think it's the right thing to do. You think that it's just how it works as a solo consultant. And what I want to say is you for sure don't want to neglect your client. That is not what we want to do. But at the same time, we want to think of our business as a equal in priority to our client. How could we carve out an hour to work on our business, every day? How could we carve out a few hours on Fridays? Versus thinking, oh, I just don't have time left over because my clients are taking all of it. So this is something, if you're in that spot, you want to address by asking yourself the question, how can I make room for my business and support my clients at the highest level? Number 2, it might be that if you are feeling like you don't have enough time for business development, that you're spending time, you might be actually spending some time on business development, but it's what I'll call the shadow lead generation. It's where you're working on website tweaking or admin instead of working on things that move the needle with your lead gen process. You want to be looking at how you're using the time that you're spending on lead gen. And when you think you don't have enough time, really taking a hard look at what it is you are spending your time on so that you're taking on those highest impact tasks, which most of the time are the ones we really don't want to do, but they are the ones that move the needle the most. And the last one I'll point out to you that you might resonate with, if you don't think you have enough time for business development, it's what I'll call the lead gen as leftovers. It's where you view business development as a task for when the dust settles or a slow day appears or things slow down, or even if you think that you don't need a client right now because you're fully utilized. And so you are treating business development in your own business as more of a bonus activity versus this is a fixed process I do all the time. Those are the most common root causes of the prioritization gap. If you're in the situation where you haven't been able to get traction on spending time consistently on business development. And then let's look at it from a different angle, what I'll call the efficiency gap. So you've got some hours, you've blocked them out on your calendar, and you're not making traction with business development. You either think that's not enough time or you ignore the time and blow past it because it's a block on your calendar, but you're not exactly sure what you're even, when you ask yourself in the mirror, look yourself in the mirror, you put that block there, but you're not exactly sure what you were intending to do with it. And even if you were sure what you were intending to do with it, you weren't truly committed to it. So that may be caused by what I'll call the overthinking loop. This might resonate with you. Are you someone who gets stuck in analysis paralysis? You've got that block on your calendar and you get there and you spend more time overthinking what you're going to do with the time, or overthinking a message you're sending to a prospect, or researching, versus doing the most impactful thing. It feels productive, but it's not. Or you might be starting from zero. You might have that time blocked off on your calendar. And again, you haven't truly detailed out what the outcomes are that you're planning to create in that block. So you kind of look at this blank paper, this blank thing on your calendar, and you aren't sure what you're going to do with it. So of course, it feels better to go do the laundry, or to make a snack, or to work on some client project, because you haven't set aside, this is what I do in that block. This is my routine that I do every time, and figuring out how to reduce the friction there. By when you get to the block, you know exactly what you're going to do every single time. So those are some of the examples of what an efficiency gap might look like, where you're not using the time that you have set aside in the most effective way possible for that time. Because you can run a business development process in 3 or 4 hours a week. You can even get yourself to the place where you're running it in 5 or 6 hours a month. But it starts with you being really intentional about what your hypothesis is on how you're going to use the time, what you think enough is when you're using the time, what the activities are, and having that as a non-negotiable when you get to that block in your calendar, and having the block in your calendar, of course, so that then you've got some inputs to measure against and figure out, okay, this hypothesis wasn't exactly right. I'm going to try this slightly shift in my routine to get to the place where you're able to know that the activities that you're doing for business development and lead generation create the results that you're expecting them to create. But you've got to overcome this mistake of thinking you don't have enough time, if that's one of your root causes. So as we wrap up today's episode, what I want to reiterate to you is that you want to look at your lead generation process from this vantage point. First, that there is opportunity for improvement. There's room for improvements, that there's nothing wrong with having challenges in your business development process. And then from that vantage point, getting yourself to break down your process into step by step, so that then you can look at and diagnose each step of the process to figure out where your bottleneck is and where your biggest opportunity for improvement is, what will move the needle for you. And putting a process in place, like I've walked you through today, some examples of diagnosing at a micro level, where is the challenge in your consulting business development pipeline, so that then you can address it, tackle it, and then move on to the next one. So hopefully that was helpful for you today as we talked through diagnosing your business development and overall pipeline process. If this is something that you would love help with, I would love to invite you to join us in the next consultant sprint. The next one that's in the real time starts on April 14th. So registration ends on the 13th of April. And the sooner you join, the sooner you have access to all of the materials to get yourself started before we jump in live together as a cohort. So go to consultantsprint.com. I would love to help you break down your pipeline, figure out where your roadblocks are, address them so that you can have a repeatable, predictable pipeline process for your consulting business and hit your revenue goals this year and every year to come. All right, my friend, good to see you. I will see you again next time. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.